Okay, let's take a look at what multi-sub-materials are and how that's going to affect you in Unreal and how they can be used. So in this case, we've got my two tree stumps I've been working on. So I've got one tree stump. It's just the tree stump. That's all it is in this asset. And you can see that it has one material element here. So element 0, which is the first one in Unreal. Okay, the one beside it is a larger asset. It has a bunch of pieces kind of put together. It has the tree stump, it has rocks, grass, it has some small branches added to it, and of course the pile of dirt, so I can just drop the whole thing out. That's this one down here at the bottom that you can see, where it has everything within it. And what you can see when I select that one is it actually has 5 elements for the materials. So it actually has element 0 to 4. And 2 of them in this case are the same because one of them is the branches, has the same texture on it as the tree. It really didn't matter what I put on there, but I just threw that on there. But it's also got the dirt, the ground on the bottom. It's got the rock, the simple rock texture I've got for the rocks, and it's got the grass textures that are here that are allowing the grass to move. Now, to be able to do this, we have to understand how to export them out of 3ds Max to be able to get these channels available to us. So back in Max, there are the elements that I put this together with. And of course, here's the final element with all of them attached together. So because I threw on some basic textures in Max, when I attached them together, it actually did it for me. So I'll open the material editor and you can see that that's happened here. These are all the individual textures that were applied to each of the objects before I attach them here. So these are the shaders here that are being used. Now, what they are now is when I pick them off this object, you get this multi-sub node, okay? And a multi-sub node can be created on its own. So if you go into general, you can actually go and create a multi-sub object node. By default, it'll make 10 of them, 10 slots, and you can set the number of slots to whatever you want to be able to use. And essentially, each one of these, when applied to a model, will become a ID'd channel in it. Now, if you notice, Max starts at 1 as opposed to Unreal starting at 0. Same thing. Okay, and they're going to be in order. Now, how does this actually work? Let's go ahead and make this up. You know what I'll do is I'll leave that there so I can open and close it. Let's make this up with a single object. So I'm going to go in and make a box. And we'll just collapse that down to an editable poly just to make our lives sort of easy. So you can see what we're doing here. I'll make it, oops. And I'm going to right click and say convert to editable poly and go into polygon mode and then pick some faces just so we can see what's happening. So in the modify panel or even over in the ribbon, so if you go to the ribbon modeling, I made it a mesh by mistake. Sorry, poly. There we go. In the ribbon modeling tool, if we pick faces, we can go down to properties and we can look at mat IDs down here. It'll be cross top for you, and it opens this dialog up. Essentially, it's the same sort of looking dialog. Now, if I pick all of these, you'll see for some reason the IDs all are different on each face. These are material IDs. Why they chose this to do with the box by default, I really don't know. So we're going to marquee around the whole thing, okay? And we're going to set the ID to ID1, the first ID to start with, okay? Now, if I just applied a material to it, it would ignore those because there's no multi-sub, but the multi-sub could end up overriding them. So the multi-sub now is here, and I'm going to apply that multi-sub with its 3 channels here. So I'm just going to dump that in, and let me just move it way over out of the way. I'll actually close that so you see a bit more room. I'm going to pull out of the first one, and I'm going to drop a physical material in. And I'm going to change this base color here to be red so that we can see what's going on. So this makes sense, is that, we've got red box, I applied a red material, but it's through this multi-sub. The multi-sub's been applied to it in channel 1. Watch what happens if I grab all of these faces again and change this to channel 2. You'll now notice it's gone back to being black because now we're on channel 2. We're taking the input from channel 2 on the multi-sub. So let's just copy this down. I'll plug that in, turns red again. And we're going to make this one green. And you can see it's all green now. Let's do the same thing for blue. And again, if I go and take all of these faces and change it to 3, they all turn blue. Now what's interesting is I can take any one given face and I can change individual faces to be different multi-sub ID numbers. So this is just applying ID numbers to a given face that correspond to this multi-sub material that's on here. Now, really, for export to Unreal, we don't even have to worry about having the textures in here, the shaders in here, sorry. We don't need these. We're going to build these ourselves. But what we do need are the slots that we need to tell Unreal that we want to use a multi-sub setup. We want to use multiple materials and what those IDs are and what they're connected to. So let's just use that same material, but this time we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to set it up in sort of a, I'm going to take a box and a sphere and a plane. So I've got a box, a sphere, and a plane. I'm going to go back, and this is kind of more how you probably end up working and don't even realize what you're doing. Let's say we have each one of these physical materials. I'm going to apply them one at a time right from the material. So if you notice, I'm not applying the multi-sub, I'm applying the material itself to each one of them. Okay, so really this isn't being used at this point. This multi-sub doesn't need to be there. We're just applying these directly to these individual objects right now, and they have these, materials applied to them. So I'm going to take the middle one, just convert it to an editable poly, and I'm going to say attach, and I want to attach them together. And as soon as I click on the box to attach it, you'll see the attach options come up. It sees that it has a different material, and it says, what do you want to do? Defaults are what you want, basically. Match the material IDs to the material. So when I apply this, and then again, I go and do it attach again, and attach that, these materials are still being used, but watch what happens when I pick the material off the object now. It actually is giving us the multi-sub. These are the same shaders that we plugged in. If you notice, the order is different, and that's because it's in the order that I attach them. I pick the green one first, became number 1. I attach the red one, became number 2. Then I attach the blue one, became number 3. And we're going to have 3 slots when we export this. So you could throw on just default shaders. You don't have to do what I've done here and actually put the materials on. I tend to like that when I start making more complex objects. I just want to see how the diffuse texture is sitting on the object. Is it going to work when I get over to Unreal? And then I send it over and I rebuild my materials from default material sets that I have over in Unreal already. So then what happens when I export this, right, is the next step. What's it going to look like over in Unreal? I'm going to use my game exporter, the one you can download and use. So I've got the path where I'm going to drop stuff. I'm going to drop a default name in here, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in, just export that out, sorry, and go step over to Unreal, and we'll just drop it in this folder, for instance. So I'm going to right click in here. I'm going to say import, and we should have my test objects. So I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to make sure that I turn off materials. Don't search, don't do anything, don't look for material, don't create a material. I'm going to do that myself in here. Don't import textures, just don't do it, is what it boils down to. Okay, so I'm going to import that, and so here's my new material, or new object that I brought in that I can add to the scene. And you can see that there's actually multiple material slots here available to us. Okay, so those are the 3, and they're in order. So the first one's going to be the sphere. The second one's going to be the box, because that's how I attach them in the order. Third one is going to be the plane. And so if I go in and grab any given materials just for the sheer fun of it, and drop in some materials, let's find something else. I don't know what this is. Depth fade matte. I don't know what it is, so maybe I'd find something else that's better. pile of dirt. There you go. So I can then apply those different shaders to those different elements within the same object. That's a multi-sub material, and that's going to be really handy for you to be able to use when you want to be able to sort of build up more complex assets in 3ds Max from multiple different objects that aren't sharing the same materials.